Over the next few months, each report was scrutinized. The recordings from each camera were watched again and again, each frame inspected. We built up our knowledge of the 5 species we had interacted with and their general attitudes. We linked it with medical data provided by Captain Switzle. From there, a breakthrough was made in augmentation. Taken from the SIVA's information, we reverse-engineered an organic-based nanomachine. Through trials, it proved to bind biological tissue to mechanical surfaces with minimal rejection. Combining it with the advances in technology we have made gave rise to a new level of prosthetics, near-perfect replacements for lost limbs. A few of our older colonies had completed construction of their own shipyards, with production started on their own Predator-class ships. Above Mars, the Vengeance-class ship was close to completion. Each side had 30 railguns, with twice as many plasma cannons. It bristled with mixtures of heavy laser and short-range plasma launcher turrets. But its main boasting point were the 4 oversized railguns running along its core. In place of hardened alloy rods, it would fire building-sized projectiles at close to light speed. It would be equipped with 2 types of projectiles to be used in different situations. The first was packed high explosives surrounded by railgun slugs. Dubbed an Armada Killer, it was designed to be fired into the midst of an enemy fleet and detonated in its center. The other was called a Planet Devastator. It held what was best described as a nuclear fusion reactor on the edge of a critical meltdown. It would be stable enough to survive the acceleration, but not enough to withstand crashing into the ground. As it drew close to being finished, the official name was released. Tokyo's Vengeance was the first of this class. On its interior, the names of Everett resident who lost their lives was engraved, as a memory of who had been lost. The rear of its bridge had a permanent projection of how it used to look, a landscape of the city before the cull. It was maneuvered from the shipyard for the final stages, leaving it free for the second Vengeance-class ship to be started. One wasn't enough. Wolf volunteered to return to Assembly Station to continue the diplomatic deception. After discussing it with the government, it was agreed that the new mission would be to find out locations of their shipyards and military outposts. It was given permission to hack into their systems and retrieve any data not given freely. Whilst it set off again to return to the station, we focused on building up our forces. With our colonies coming online, it would be faster for us to build up our fleet. Gus Wolf powered through its journey, but as it went, an alert sounded. An unknown ship was matching its speed. It came into view and a message was broadcast. It showed a SIVA, one who had its jaw replaced. "Tasty prey. Surrender your ship and we will let you live." Captain Harris addressed the bridge. "Scans, what have they got?" "Sir, it looks to be a pair of plasma cannons along with a heavy laser cannon." He nodded. "Weapons, how are we looking?" "Plasma cannons are charging. Should be ready to fire in 30 seconds. Railguns are loaded and ready." He smiled. "Wolf, could you open up a channel to this ship? Let's get ourselves some goodwill with the collective." A screen was lower in front of him, and he straightened his uniform. There was a momentary black screen before a connection was established. It resolved into the metal-jawed SIVA, who deliberately exposed his pointed teeth. Prey I haven't seen before. Well, my offer still stands. Give up your ship and we will let you go. I'm sure you have some escape shuttles you can cram into." Captain Harris let silence hang for a good few seconds. As the SIVA opened its mouth to speak again, he interrupted. "I will decline and instead say you are under arrest." The SIVA laughed. This prey has teeth. And under arrest, you say? I would like to see you try." With that, it closed the call, obviously decided in its course of action. "Sir, they're getting in front. Should we ram them?" He looked to the helm and shook his head. "No, let's return to normal space." At his order, the ship slowed. Wolf pulled up a display of the enemy ship. It was much smaller than Gus Wolf, barely a kilometer long. Wold highlighted a couple of areas on the scan, drawing attention to them. These looked to be power sources for their weapons. A precision shot should disable them. They broke into normal space, far away from any stars. The SIVA's ship spun around, firing a salvo of plasma. The shots scattered harmlessly off Wolf's shields, not quite strong enough to cause issues. After taking time to aim, a pair of railgun shots were loosened. They punched through rudimentary shields, crushing their way through the ship's hull. The charging cannons fell silent, the battle already over. "Wolf, could you set up a connection again?" Of course. It took a minute for it to be answered, the Siva now showing fear at how quickly it had been beaten. You are not prey, I surrender, Harris smiled. No, we are not. Wolf, let's bring them in. A few scouting drones were launched towards the crippled ship. Through careful nudging, it was brought to a docking station, before being lashed to the hull. Being about 1 kilometer long, the load would be manageable. A shuttle was sent across with a squad of soldiers, their orders to secure the pirates. Although surrender had been given, we couldn't necessarily accept it as completely true. They attached, quickly swarming the opening in a practiced maneuvered. Captain Harris watched over a live feed, pleased with their actions. They carefully aimed at a welcoming party, ones who held strange but recognizable weapons. There were 11 in total, each boasting a stocky, muscled body. Fortunately for them, they held their weapons to the side, barrels facing down. Foremost was the metal-jawed Siva. Its upgrade gave it a permanent grin as it regarded our display of force. Ah, the not prey in the flesh, so good to meet you, strangers. Will you do me the honor of knowing what species you are? The squad leader spoke clearly and loudly, letting the translator built into their helmet make it so the Siva could understand them. We are humans, and you are under arrest. We ask you come willingly, but we will resort to force if you force our hand. The group of Siva laughed, rough grating sounds. Their leader spoke again, amusement evident. Humans? Ah, I have heard this. You are new, yes? We know force, and yours is strong, much stronger than those who claim to rule. We will gladly surrender to one such as you, yes. Consider the flames in Savigas and its crew at your disposal. It was backed with nods from the other Siva. They moved in a rough group, hoisting their weapons. They let go of the grip as they did, holding the barrels instead. The weapons were proffered to each of our soldiers. There was a brief shuffling of feet before the leader took one. There was no resistance, as they took part in what they guessed was their way of surrendering. They were guided into the shuttle, half of the squad traveling with them. The others stayed behind, as Wolf took the opportunity to scan the ship in close detail, no longer having to deal with the void of space. It gave them a map, leading them to the bridge. In short order, they took control, giving Wolf a direct feed into the Flames computer. It noted with interest that there was no AI on board, restrained or otherwise. It seemed that there were programs to handle FTL calculations and the like, but no intelligence to them. Their distrust of such things seemed to run deep. Crew members were to be confined to their quarters, unless allowed out to perform closely watched maintenance. Those whose primary role was to take part in the physical raiding were brought aboard Gus Wolf, each put into the brig. The metal-jawed one was taken to the captain, who chose to meet them in a meeting room over an interrogation chamber. They watched the captain enter, tasting the air. Shipmaster, what a delight to see such a fine adversary. Harris took a chair, lacing his fingers together. It wasn't much of a fight, but thank you. Tell me, what should I call you? It was met with a snort. True, it wasn't much, but what can I say? Most prey give up when we come by. I guess you could say we have grown too warm on the rock to remember the shade. You can call me Kivreya, mother of 10 daughters. Harris nodded. That sounds like a good name. I'm called Harris. Kivreya grinned again. To think such a fine shipmaster would give me their name. Harris leaned backwards, carefully choosing his words. You're welcome. As you mentioned, we are new to the galactic stage, as it were. So naturally, we are trying to get a lay of the land. What can you tell me that might otherwise be hidden? She tasted the air again, thinking. There is probably much, but as for what is hard to say, new ones are rare, as you will have guessed, being smart as you are. But they are weak, that is sure. He leaned in, interested. That word, weak, how do you mean? Kivreya hissed in amusement, her tail lashing. Weak in so many ways. They demand rules to cover every occurrence, no strength of mind to adapt. They care little for proper fighting, choosing words over action. Most eat plants, not proper food, just so many weak ways. He nodded as if understanding a puzzle. I see now why you called us not prey then. Oh yes, prey will run and rarely fight back. You didn't hesitate, such strength. Harris smiled. Well, that's what we do. Though I have to ask, why did you surrender so readily? Kivreya sighed, scratching where flesh met metal. The battle was already over. To give up is an admission of respect to the victor. Not giving up is the coward's way or the way of those who have accepted their own death. I have no wish to have my daughters or sons slain, or any more at least. Harris nodded, setting that question aside. Well, that's all the time I have now. You will be under guard here, but you should be safe as long as you behave. I'm sure we will have more talk soon, though, as we have a little while to go. Kivrea gave a grin. I hope we will. Following the acquisition of the flames in Savigas, the remaining trip was estimated to take an additional few days. There was little rush to reach the station, allowing the crew time to interact with their pirate guests. Harris spent much of his sparse free time talking with Kivrea. She was willing to speak, always acting in deference to him. They talked about the history of the collective, mainly on the criminal side. It seemed that the stories we had heard from the Quelon were true. Pirates were a rarity, maybe making up one ship in every million. Even petty criminals were few and far between. During one chat, he broached the subject of military bases. He spoke of it from the view of defense, with emphasis on logical locations to provide best coverage. Her knowledge wasn't perfect, as she tended to give such places a wide berth. But she mentioned a few systems of ore-rich planets that were known bases. Wolf listened in, highlighting each one on a star chart. They seemed to exist roughly every 2,000 to 3,000 light-years, with little in the way of outposts. We were pleased to have a start, especially from such an unlikely source. As they drew closer, Harris mentioned a question that had been weighing on his mind for a bit. Kivrea, I'm curious, what would be your likely punishment? How do they treat this sort of thing? She fiddled with a pen, a half-finished drawing of a Siva lying before her on the table. The prey leaders operate on a 4-strike rule. The first strike leads you to undergo mandatory psychoanalysis and treatment whilst incarcerated. They say that everyone deserves a second chance, and the system must have failed them. Sure, it works on some, but for me, it didn't. The second stage is where I am at. This is less help to correct your course of action and more punishment. I and much of my crew will be sent to a penal colony and made to work off our debts. This will happen alongside more analysis and treatment. The third stage is where they give up on pirates. You get permanent incarceration with less focus on treatment and more on understanding why you took this path. Generally, this is where most stop. There have only been 2 that I know of who have reached the 4th stage, having escaped from their imprisonment. That stage is only used in times where there is undeniable evidence of actions taken. It is when the prey find their teeth and stomachs. They execute the accused and hope they find forgiveness in wherever they end up. Harris gave a long breath. She spoke very matter-of-factly, seemingly uncaring of the possibility of such punishment. Penal colonies? So what? They force you into slave labor? Kivrea gave a low laugh. Oh no. From what I've heard, you get paid. You can't spend it on anything, but it gives you a boost when you leave. Not enough to buy me another ship, but I have backup funds. He thought for a moment, sending a message to Natasha via Wolf. Whilst waiting for her reply, he turned his attention back to the 6-foot humanoid lizard before him. How do they decide who gets your work, though? Kivrea returned to her drawing, casually talking about her upcoming punishment. It goes to whoever was harmed, so I'm most likely to go to the Kreshat as they made up the bulk of my raids. But then again, you brought me in, so your wishes would carry weight. Harris got a returned message, agreeing with his actions. He let out a breath, knitting his fingers together. Well, I would like to propose a deal then. I would speak on your behalf to the court or judge or whoever I need to. I would get you assigned to us as your penal colony, under the guise of you attacking us with provocation. In return, you agree to work with us. We could use you and your crew's knowledge and capabilities. She hissed, continuing to draw as one eye focused on him. An interesting offer. I am sure you have much to gain from a partnership. My crew will follow me wherever, but how should I know you will treat us fairly? Harris spread his arms wide, gesturing around. Have we done anything to make you think that? We disabled your ship, that is true. But we did not kill any more than the few who were unfortunate enough to be in the target zone. You have each been given food, beds to rest on, and entertainment where appropriate. We have also made sure to provide medical assistance to those injured in our scuffle. That is simple for prisoners, Of course, you would be watched, as I'm sure you can understand. But you will be more like allies than threats. She bared her teeth, her hiss jumping up and down with each breath. You are brave for this. But what would you do if I told this to the collective? He grinned back. I would deny all knowledge of this conversation. Who would they believe? A race who is eager to join? Or a pirate who has already been through the system once? They fell silent, each watching the other. It stretched onwards to minutes before Kivrea gave another hiss. Her tongue flicked out, and she placed down her pencil. With exaggerated movements, she put her four-fingered hands together, extending them forwards. The sudden movement made the room guards tense, holding weapons tightly. But a wave from Harris made them ease a little, even as they kept a close watch. He copied her gesture before she spoke. You're meant to put your hands to enclose mine. Oh. He did so, feeling her cold scales rub slightly. Her voice came out rough but formal. I, Kivrea, mother of 10 daughters, do agree to this. May my life and that of my family be in your care. Once spoken, she let her hands drop. She grinned at him, looking around at the guards. I hope you live up to your end of the bargain. Harris nodded. We will do our best. Was that your way of concluding business? Kivrea nodded whilst shaking her head. Yes and no. For most, a simple hand touch is enough. But for something important like that, it shows you as the controlling party. What do you do? Harris held out his hand. I see, well, a lot of us shake hands. If you out yours in mine, I will demonstrate. She carefully placed hers inside, keeping her claws away from his skin. He pumped their joined hands 3 times before releasing. That's how we do it. I look forward to working with you. She laughed again. And I you. With an agreement in place, some of the tension around the ship dispersed. Although still watched, the Siva were given better treatment. A few at a time were allowed to walk the corridors of Gus Wolf under escort. They would ask questions about certain design choices, but mostly seemed to be enjoying the ability to have a different way to stretch their legs. A couple of the more rowdy ones challenged crew members to a sparring match. It was initially denied, though their increasing insistence finally reached the ear of Captain Harris. He gave an approval for a couple of matches to go ahead. Whilst data was all very well and good for extracting from systems, he knew that a physical demonstration would often show more. When the first fists flew, it was apparent the difference in training. The Siva had powerful blows, but they had little in the way of precision. The chosen soldier spent time defending, observing his opponent. The watching Siva hollered, excited by the display. They seemed to think our human outmatched, with the lack of aggression. But after getting a handle on how they fought, he began to take the offense. In short order, he had struck the Siva's joints multiple times, deadening muscles. A leg sweep caused them to fall, landing with a heavy thud. They let out a pained sound, raising a hand in submission. I submit. You win. The soldier grinned, reaching down to help them up. Already, I was just getting warmed up. Laughter filled the room as the next Siva stepped in the ring. Once again, the match started with the Siva in full offense, but after a much shorter time, the soldier once again went on the attack, quickly subduing his opponent. To the Siva's surprise, they remained in the ring even after 2 fights. Are you not tired out? There is no shame in admitting your exhaustion. The soldier shook his head at their words, a confident grin on his face. This is nothing. We normally got for 12 rounds of 3 minutes each. A couple of 2-minute spars is easy. Their shock at it led us to realize a key difference in our skills. They were strong in small bursts, quickly overwhelming their opponent for a rapid victory. We weren't as strong but could endure a lot more than they could. Whilst they were based on an ambush predator, we were endurance ones. The exit to Assembly Station was met with little fanfare. The Siva were put into their confinement and a communication channel was opened to the station. This is Gus Wolf of Humanity. Come in Assembly Station. We read you, Gus Wolf. It's a pleasure to see you again. Please proceed to the spoke you used before. A beacon was provided, showing the spoke had rotated around during the time they were away. The ship began to power towards the dock as Wolf left the channel open. Thank you, Assembly Station. We also have a vessel with us that we had to disable. Call sign Flames in Savagas. There was a murmur on the other end before the person on their communication spoke again. You took down a pirate? Understood. Please proceed as planned. Station authorities will meet you there. Captain Harris quickly sprung to action, talking to Wolf. Tell them we wish to see their way of delivering justice. Wolf responded with an image of a thumbs up. We'll do assembly station. We wish to observe the legal process if representatives are allowed. That should not be an issue, Gus Wolf. Thank you, assembly station. Gus Wolf out. With permission granted, the rest of their trip to docking passed by uneventfully. The SIVA crew were brought to the docking bay, watched over carefully. Kivria made sure they understood their position was to seem unhappy and not enjoying the company. Exterior cameras showed a force of Evonzi assembled, approximately 50 of the oversized praying mantis-looking things. Unlike the pair that had delivered the masks and translators, these were wearing armor plating with various sized manacles on their sides. They were focused on the airlock, waiting for something. Pushing through the back was a much larger figure. It bristled with short fur, supported on 4 enormous legs. Its large head had no eyes, instead 2 trunks sprouting from each side. It had a large mouth filled with crushing teeth, with a tube running from it to a pair of tanks on its side. It wore a sort of overall covering its legs and chest with straps tied across its back. This was a Kreshut. Natasha took the front, wearing one of the masks and translators. After the time spent back home, the masks had been adapted to fit a bit better, with a series of sensors to determine the exact makeup of the air. She nodded to no one in particular, and Wolf opened the door. The Kreshut spoke first, its loud voice rumbling through the air. Welcome back. You have pirates for us, correct? Thank you, and yes, we do. Though we do ask that we be involved with the proceedings surrounding their case. I have been told this. We shall process their details first before they are presented for judgment. Thank you, we will be eager to attend. At a shake from the lumbering giant's head, the Avanzi swept in. They rapidly manacled each SIVA, guiding each one out. Kivrea looked to Captain Harris, relaxing a little at the wink he gave her. The congregation soon disappeared, as each SIVA was taken away. The Kreshut brought up the rear, slowing, stomping away. Taking their place was a recognizable purple figure as Genev approached the ship. Its mouth was in a flat line. Natasha, good to see you again. Your trip back here was eventful, it seems. She nodded, holding out a hand. It took it. It was indeed. But they surrendered when they realized we weren't so easily beaten. I would have hated for us to sour relations with our second time meeting a ship ending in total bloodshed. Genev gave a slow clap. I understand. But you would have been defending your interests, which is understandable. I'm aware you wish to take part in their legal process, correct? She gave a small nod. Yes, we would. With us looking to join, it would be prudent for us to understand how you decide guilt and dish out justice.